I want you to break down for me what someone needs to do if they find themselves with the following 3 types of cash. So, today, if you've got £10,000 saved up in cash, £100,000 saved up in cash, and £250 saved up in cash, what strategy should you be deploying for each one of those, starting with 10,000?
The very first thing you do with anybody, whether they've got 10,000, 100,000 or 250,000 pounds, first of all, you need to understand where the client is, who the client is, what are they doing, how do they accumulate that 10,000, right? And what is the bigger picture in their life? Where do they want to get to? It doesn't matter how much money you got. That's the starting point for everyone. Yeah. So for the person who's got 10,000, what is it? Is he married? Is he single? Has he got a property? Has he got an ISA? Has he got a pension? Now, ISA and pensions are something that you probably sort of look at later on, but immediately, what are his needs? So the biggest question is, what is his income and what is his expenditure? Is he comfortable? Yeah, is he saving money, this £10,000? Where did it come from? Or is he got liabilities? So if he's got liabilities which are completely messing up his cash flow, then we need to look at and attack that and make a plan for that.
So what if the money that they're earning, whether it's a job or whatever, is covering their rent/mortgage, car payment, and a few other bits and pieces, and literally that 10,000, sometimes it's been 11,000, sometimes it's been 12, sometimes it's been 9.5. But there's generally, this hypothetical person's always got 10k floating around.
Yeah.
And we know with inflation that it's not doing that much. But let's just assume that whatever they're doing for a job is addressing each of their, monthly costs.
Yeah.
With maybe leaving a couple of quid extra at the end, which they just chuck onto that 10,000. So where should that be deployed at the moment? Because we're seeing a lot of changes in terms of where that money can go.
Right. So again, then you got to also, apart from his income and expenses, and if this is accumulated from the surplus that he's getting each month, each year, and if this is steady £10,000, then first thing you need to do is to make sure that there is an allowance left in a bank in cash for any emergency money. That's quite important because you never know what's going to happen. And with the £10,000, then in the view of what he can do is eventually or initially he needs to make sure that money is working for him. So it's not sitting in cash for a longer period. When I say longer period, 2 years plus. And then looking at his objectives of what are the things that he needs to do to build up. So is that £10,000 going to go into an ISA initially to make sure that that money is working for us? So he's getting something like 5% plus return on it.
Even today, with interest rates going down, 5% possible?
Well, most of my clients in last 12 months have earned 14, 15%.
Because of the right choice of ISA?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. If you're into cash ISA, then it's not going to do that. But
yeah,
it all depends on when that money is going to be used. So if somebody's going to use that money within 1 or 2 years, yes, it needs to be in cash. If it's longer term money, then, it needs to be invested and make sure that money is working for them.
And then over a 5-year window, you might see, let's say, a 14% uplift every single year, which means in about 5 years' time, you could double your money.
Yeah. So from my perspective, I would look at as a marker of 5% return year by year. So you're going to get some years where the market is going to be down, some years are going to be, but if you average out 5% plus, then your money is working for you. But it's not going to do you great for long term. So you need to start to work on what and how we're going to make this difference. So when you talk about money and how much money you got to work out how we're going to change. So if you look at my life, I was negative cash flow. And it took me a while to get to where I am. And as soon as I could leverage my money, and that's after my first property, that it started to work. Yeah. So by just saving money in bank and cash and ISAs, you're not going to have that. Long term, yes, you are. But if you want to continue to make money, then we need to sit down and have a serious think about how we're going to make more money. How are we going to leverage that money to make that? Are we in position to buy a property? Are we in position to do this? Yeah. Somebody at that age, early age, has got £10,000, is not putting money into pension because they can't touch that money until they're 55. The reason why my clients put money into pension is for tax efficiency. It's nothing to do with pension. Pension is a product. It's an investment product. It's a tax-free product which you can't touch until you're 55.
It also comes with, like, it's also had a bit of a branding issue, hasn't it? The pension, in the sense that
it's a
if you're in
dirty
your
word.
late 20s,
Yes.
you don't want to consider yourself like a pensioner, which is an older dude with a flat cap and a stick, right? You don't. It almost feels like unfortunately, the brand pension is tied right into that demographic.
Yeah.
So that's 10,000. So you've got to come up with a near-term plan, and maybe what good looks like for 10,000 is just turning it into 20. So going from like a small amount of money to a slightly less small amount of money.
Yeah, make that money work for you.
Yeah.
Don't leave it in cash and just wait for something to happen for you to buy a property or whatever. Let's look at that strategy, how much money we're going to need and how is that going to be possible and when is that going to be possible. And that's the thing that you need to start to work with. It's like my grandfather's story. If you're comfortable, you're dead. You're dead. If you're comfortable, finish. You have to move on. And this moment in time, the only product I think that can work for this person would be an ISA. Yeah?
Okay. 100K.
Well, 100K is slightly different story. You got a bit of money there. And then again, and the same principle is same principle. If you've got £1 million or £100,000, you need to understand the client, where they are.
You've spoken about this sometimes. It's almost like, imagine you just take a box of £100,000 into your kitchen, and you imagine that £100,000 is food, and you think about it in terms of when you're going to need to eat that money, eat that food.
Exactly.
Break that down for the 100K.
So the £100,000, you got to work out, well, even before how you eat the money or how you use the money, how you make that money work for you. What you need to understand there is very simple. Understand the client first. What have they got? Where are they? What is their income? What is their expenses? Standard thing.
All roads lead back to that. Whether you've got 10K, 100K, 250K.
It doesn't matter.
How much
what
you're earning, how much you're spending, what's the delta?
What's that comfort zone for you, right? So once you understood that and you look at what other things have they got. Now, if you're talking about just £100,000 as lazy cash, then yes, then we start looking at what have they got. So in the background, what stuff they've got. So say, for example, if the client was a high rate taxpayer and it's got young kids who are going to go for further education, we can prescribe him, if that was the money that maybe he wants to save for his children's school fees, for example, and is a higher rate taxpayer. So then I will give him a prescription of saying, well, if you actually put this, it can be more tax efficient way for you to save that, to do that. If he wants to make his money, so again, you will use the ISAs, depending on client's age, whether he's anywhere near, 55, then we would consider that, yes, if you put money into pension, you will get that 20%, 40% tax relief or 45% tax relief from the government. And if you then tax the money out after age 55, he's going to take 25% tax-free.
Tax-free, yeah.
Yeah. So if you look at those numbers, then I think I may need to recalculate it. But back in the day, I'd worked out that by just putting money in and taking it out, I think you'll make 9%.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now is that the full 100K or a slice of it?
Of the 100K.
The whole 100K.
100K, yeah.
So dump it into a pension, forget about it, let it grow. At 55,
No,
take
it out the
25
next day.
How? I didn't understand. Explain that to me.
So, where I was working with Kenswood Garage, which was the VW Audi franchise, and we had a lady there who would work for us for quite a long time, and she was given a handshake money when she left. So she was asking me, what should I do? At that time, I wasn't even a financial advisor, because I'd learned things from Martin. And I was saying to her that, look, actually, what could you do with this money? Let's do this way. You're going to need income from this money, right? So let's put the whole lot into pension. To put the whole lot into the pension, she was a 20% taxpayer. So she gets 20% tax relief on that money straight away.
Right.
So you get 20% tax relief. So your money, in the numbers, you say you got £20,000, you get 20% tax relief, and you got now the fund 20 plus 20% tax relief. You then take out 25% out of that value of 25,000 or whatever it is as tax free. 5K. So
and then amortized across the full 20K, it's a net 9% up.
Yeah. So
Wonderful.
now if you then look at your fund value, if you want to take it out, and if she hasn't got other income, she might have a pension income. So you got to look at what income tax you're paying.
Sure.
And then she can start drawing money from the pension, either pay a little bit tax or no tax until the allowance is in.
Yeah.
So we can work on those numbers. So it's about, say, if somebody was getting £100,000, you slice it out. What are the client's objectives? What age are they? What is the situation, financial situation, family situation, job situation, and that kind of stuff.
And once you get to 100K, you're probably going to be assumed to be at a different age, which means that the window of opportunity to take these wrappers like pensions and things of that nature is going to adjust downwards.
Yeah.
250K. If you've somehow found yourself in a situation where maybe you started a side business and it popped, or you were in a company for a long time and all of a sudden you had your moment and you got a bonus. Maybe you had 100K already, 150 jumped in. Maybe you had 225, 25 jumped in. Maybe you had nothing and went from 0 to 250, and now here you are with lazy cash. Brilliant term that you came up with. What do? It's sat there in your bank account. The piranhas that are inflation are swimming around it, ready to bite away.
Yeah.
What move do you make?
So first thing you need to do is make your money work for you. So then you'll use different wrappers.
And you can use multiple on 250.
Yes, you can use different wrappers. So if you think about it, let's look at it. So if you've got money in the bank, you can have £1 million in bank and you'll get interest on it. That's it. Yeah. If you got money in an investment, for example, and it's a general investment account, you can have whatever sum of money you want to put into that, and that money will be taxed.
Like an ETF or tracking the S&P,
Yes,
whatever it may
that's
be.
it, yeah. So it's an investment account.
Yeah.
It will be taxed at either dividends or capital gains and whatever. So you got all those taxes in there. And then you can have an ISA, for example. It's tax-free. But you limit it to how much you can put in that. So if you've got £250,000, you can only put £20,000. Yeah? So utilize that, number one. So first point would be tax-free, wrapper. Let's put that in there. And the next
and do
thing,
the obvious ones first, 20 grand into an ISA, etc.
yeah, that's the basic thing.
Yeah.
And then you start, and then you look at every tax year and understand where you're going on. So what we've done in past is saying, like, okay, so you can only put 20,000. The investments are exactly same as what you'll have a general investment account, but that one is taxed. ISA is not taxed. So each year, if there's a couple, you put £40,000 or you put £20,000. Each year, each tax year, you transfer from general investment account into an ISA. Yeah, so you're adding that ISA built up.
Yeah, and the cash is already waiting for you, just waiting for its chance after April to jump into the
Exactly.
go from the taxable part into the non-taxable part, which is the ISA.
Exactly. And then you'll also use pension as a wrapper. Yeah. Again, depending on client's age and objectives and stuff like that. And if they're higher tax fare, I allow pension, because then that gives them that element of investment that goes into that wrapper. Of course, here again we got limits of how much you can put into pension. And today we can, and in my business, from the day I started with as a financial planner, the pension rules have changed so much. Every other year or every budget, there is some changes coming up.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't want to go into the pension education here, but if you look at pension, is again a good place to be because it gives you those tax benefits, right? So that will be another element of a wrapper that we can use to put the money into. Once you've done that, and then you got something like called a bond, and bond has got its own tax situations, how it works, right? So sometimes it's very helpful. So you can have an onshore bond and an offshore bond. So it all depends on client's circumstances, which product would fit. So these are the products that you can use. And there is the last one, and that's my favorite. It's called a property wrapper. The property can make you money very quickly in the way that is because you're leveraging money. You're making the money work for it. So if you've got £100,000 property, all you got to put down is 25,000 into it. So if you got £200,000 and if all of that money was going to property, then you put 25 and you buy the properties in the area where it's going to be making you that return on your investment, and there is some capital growth. So you got to do your research and stuff like that. So we have a team of people who do that all the time, and I'm blessed that we have got a really good team which does this for people. And I can give you my example how the property works. So when Tina came back from New York and she wanted to live in London, so she wanted to buy a flat in Bethnal Green, and I was not happy. And what's wrong with Stanmore? No, she wanted to be in this place, and I don't know why. And then she dragged me to look at this property in Bethnal Green. It was the top floor there. You got high view of London, amazing. It was in the evening, and I said, "Yeah, we'll buy this." So when we bought that property, then she got married. I didn't have to save a single penny towards her wedding, because all I did was release the equity from the property which had built up, paid for the whole wedding. There was no pain. There was absolutely no pain. And now that property is still there, making money, and is working each month, year. And that just tells you the story that how you can make an asset like that work for you to pay for expenses that you don't have to save up for.